Blog Talk Radio.
Radio, and tonight we are talking about the Antichrist Maitreya and Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Now, the Maitreya, as they call this entity, or Lord Maitreya, is described in Theosophical literature of the late 19th century and subsequent periods as an advanced spiritual entity and high-ranking member of a hidden spiritual hierarchy, the so-called Masters of the Ancient Wisdom. According to the Theosophical doctrine, one of the hierarchy functions is to oversee the evolution of humankind. In accordance with its function, Maitreya is said to hold the so-called office of the World Teacher. Theosophical texts posit that the purpose of this office is to facilitate the transfer of knowledge about the true constitutions and workings of existence to humankind. Humanity is therefore assisted on its presumed cyclical but ever-progressive evolutionary path. Reputedly, one way the knowledge transfer is accomplished is by Maitreya occasionally manifesting or incarnating in the physical realm. The manifested entity then presumes the role of World Teacher of Humankind. Now, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, she was the founder of the Theosophical Society. It's kind of a New Age religion. In fact, I think it's like the New Age religion. She was born in 1831, died in 1891, and she believed that the returned Buddha, the Maitreya, is linked to the return of Jesus and other ascended masters. Blavatsky talked of a so-called Christ principle, which her view corresponds to the spiritual essence of every human being. Kind of like the principle of God is within you, or everybody's like a little God or something like that. Now, Benjamin Cream, he's the founder of a organization called Share International, and its doctrines are similar to Theosophy. It's a promoter of the Maitreya. In 1975, Cream claimed to have started the telepathic channel of Maitreya. Maitreya allegedly communicated to him that he had decided to return to Earth earlier than 2025. Cream eventually announced that the Maitreya materialized in a physical body for himself in early 1977 in the Himalayas and then moved to London. Cream has made a number of extraordinary statements and predictions based on telepathic messages from the Maitreya, and all of which have failed. Tim, have you researched much about the Maitreya and Helena Blavatsky?
Reading just briefly about all of them. In fact, I'm sitting here looking at a picture of the guy you were just talking about, trying to figure out how to pronounce his name that he's got here, a big, long, like a Hindu-type name. It brings me to mind of, the Bible. We're in a time where Christians are talking about the end time, and Jesus said, be wary in Matthew 24 when people start saying, here's Jesus, and there's Jesus, over here is Jesus. We've got these people setting themselves up as messiahs. And I was reading all their doctrine. The two, Maitreya and the Theosophy, let me read this. Their basic... I'm trying to pull something up. Okay. The Theosophical Society in America encourages open-minded inquiry into the world religions, philosophy, science, and the arts in order to understand the wisdom of the ages. respect the unity of all life, and help people explore spiritual, and here's the key word, self-transformation. Again, from a Christian standpoint, it's Jesus that came and died for us to bring us to God. And what we have is a mishmash of people trying to do it theirself. You can meditate. When you get into the tenets of Theosophical Society and the Maitreya, he has a big, long list, too long to read here. It would take quite a while. But, they talk about good deeds. Being kind is bringing God into yourself. Doing charitable acts is bringing God into yourself. But it's all self-promotion, me making me a God. And it's like me patting myself on the back of what a wonderful guy I am, and now I'm godly by my goodness. And it's sad because you mentioned it while you were speaking earlier. They throw Jesus into this pile of stuff, and what I just read of, taking all the wisdom of the ages and using that for me to promote myself to godhood, and it just isn't going to work.
Mhm. Yeah, the main problem that I find with this whole New Age movement, it sounds really cool, all this enlightenment stuff, and everybody getting along, and one of Helena Blavatsky's things was that there should be no distinction between race, color, creed, and that all sounds really good up until the point where we talked about tolerance and intolerance last time. And it seems to me there's a major emphasis on tolerance. And everybody has to be tolerant of, people that sin. And that's fine. We're all sinners. And I think we have to realize that when we do sin, we should repent for our sins and ask for forgiveness and accept Christ as our Savior. And that way we'll be forgiven. But the problem with the New Age movement is that the New Age movement itself is intolerant of biblical principles. As long as you're tolerant of everything under the sun except what it says in the Bible, then that's okay. And what they seem to say in the New Age philosophy is that people who aren't willing to go along with it are going to be holding it back, and they'll have to be eliminated. I know in the Bible, in a couple of different sections, I think it's in Matthew and Exodus as well, it says, thou shalt not kill. Exodus 20:13 says, thou shalt not kill. And then in Matthew 5:21, it says, ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill. And whomsoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. And yet they seem to overlook that when it comes to the New Age philosophy, because basically anybody who doesn't go along with it, they preach that person or that group of people, i.e. fundamentalist Christians in particular, should be killed because they're holding them back.
Right, and most of the principles that they propound is something you can find in the Bible anyway. Okay, Theosophy. Well, sophistry is wisdom, love of wisdom. So this is finding the wisdom of God. Well, read Proverbs. It's the book of wisdom. It says over and over, above all things, get wisdom. Wisdom is the thing. So they take a principle of God and call it their own. But it's always from the standpoint of, we're doing it, and we don't need this Jesus guy. And like you said, we don't need these any of this Bible stuff, except there's nobody in their writings or their speaking that they might deny that they got it from the Bible. They might not have read the Bible and read it right out of it, but it's in the world. I mean, everybody in the world almost now has heard the Bible preached, and they're getting the principles right there from the book. And they just, man just has this thing where they just want to be supreme, which is the principle of Lucifer. I will exalt myself above the throne of God. I'm going to be God. And that gets me into Helena Blavatsky. One of her books is Isis, revealed. Now, Isis was the Egyptian goddess with Osiris, and we've talked a lot about the Illuminati and the Masons. You get right back to the key of what they're looking at. They're bringing Isis and Osiris back, and it all goes back to that Egyptian god pantheon of human man-made gods and idols that deny Christ and deny the one true living God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right. Yeah, where most of these Theosophical types get their information is from channeling spirits. There was a woman called Alice Bailey, and she channeled a spirit who called himself Djwhal Khul. That's DJWHALKHUL.
DJ Cool. Yeah, I remember him. He's a rapper, right?
She claimed that he spoke through her saying, "Death is not a disaster to be feared. The work of the destroyer is not cruel or undesirable. Therefore, there is much destruction permitted by the custodians of the plan, and much evil turned into good." And so it's like they're coming up with their own scripture from these channeled entities, which they consider to be divine. And it's like they're channeling these spirits who claim that they've themselves died and gone to heaven or wherever they went. And they're telling you the real laws of life. And one of those is not necessarily that murder is not a bad thing. It's good as long as it, helps them achieve their goal, the plan, they call it. One of the biggest problems with the New Age movement is that its propensity toward bringing forth the concept of evolution. And what they say is that we're all evolving as humans into this higher level of consciousness. And
right.
And so they say that the fundamentalist Christians and the Jews and people who believe in the Bible, they are holding you back and hence
right.
not evolving. And Hitler himself used evolution as a reason to, commit genocide during the Nazi regime. So evolution is a huge problem. And do you remember the story about the dinosaur bone? It was a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone that was found within the last several years, and it had a blood vessel still intact. And they determined that blood vessel couldn't have been more than 30,000 years old. Well, I was reading this article about the woman who discovered that bone, and she was supposed to give a speech at this archaeological symposium, like a big international one. And when it came up to her time to talk, like the program somehow got changed, and her topic was deleted. And they pretty much never brought it up again. So it's like they know for a fact that there's a Tyrannosaurus Rex bone with tissue in it that couldn't be more than 30,000 years old, but they're burying it because that would basically undermine the theory of evolution, which would more or less help prove that evolution is not the way things were created.
What happened next happened by mistake. Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast, and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was, and it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
No.
She showed us video she took under the microscope.
That's really what happened?
Yes.
That's the dinosaur bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old.
So you see this and you think, what?
I didn't want to tell anybody.
You'd be ridiculed,
yes.
Right?
And so I said to my technician, okay, do it again. I don't believe it.
And yet, in sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels. she finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
She said she dissolved the bone away and there were blood vessels. And, I was like shocked.
How could that be?
How could that be? That's right.
The things Mary was finding inside dinosaur bones,
Look at that.
blood vessels, and even what seemed to be intact cells, pose a radical challenge to the existing rules of science, that organic material can't possibly survive even 1 million years, let alone 68 million. Mary, Jack, and their team published their B-Rex findings in a series of papers in the journal Science and were promptly attacked. Critics said their samples might have been contaminated, or that the supposed blood vessels were actually something called biofilm, a type of slime. But as Mary showed us, she's been able to replicate her findings. These are pieces of an even older dinosaur, a well-preserved 80-million-year-old duckbill. When she dissolved it away in acid...
Let's put this under the scope here.
Well, look.
Is that a blood vessel?
This is a blood vessel.
You're
You
kidding.
see the branches right there? And look at all of them. And it's so consistent over and over and over again. We do this bone and it comes out and I get excited every time. I can't help it. 80 million years old.
Mary published her new results last year, and while some of her critics have been swayed, the controversy still rages, and the stakes are high.
That would basically undermine the theory of evolution, which would more or less help prove that evolution is not the way things were created. They were created by God.
Yeah, there's a lot of scientific evidence like that. Again, I listen a lot to Dr. Carl Baugh, and he's back in Roseville, Texas. And he was working with a mathematician. I don't know the gentleman's name, but this guy was kind of the go-to mathematician. When major mathematical problems were unsolvable, they'd go to this guy. Well, he started working on the principle of the magnetic core of the Earth. We know that it's degenerating, and the magnetic poles are getting weaker, and they know the rate, the exponential rate that is decreasing, so they did the math backwards to a point where it would have been so strong that life wouldn't be sustainable. You know how they always say you can get like cancer being too near the power lines and all that, and your telephone. Well, the magnetic core is similar. That strong magnetic core, which actually helps our life, sustains us, but you increase it to a certain point, it's going to be detrimental. Doing the math, he proved that the Earth can't be any more than 10,000 years old because, 6 to 10,000 years old, because beyond that point, that core would be so strong life would be unsustainable.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Nobody wants to talk to him, though. She was the premier mathematician. He comes out with that. No, you're crazy. They trust his math. They believe his math. You know what I mean? All his math up till then is perfect, but now they don't want to hear it. Why? Because it, like you said, it ruins their theory. And it is just a theory. It's not fact. He gives them fact. They hate him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like the Christmas thing. I was looking on Facebook at all the various Christmas posts, and I thought I would post something, out of Luke, which stated that there will be a sign, a baby born in a manger in swaddling clothes, and, something about the birth of Christ. And, I looked and looked and looked, and I didn't see any other posts talking about, Jesus. It was just like happy holidays and seasons greetings. And, I realized that back in 300 A.D., Emperor Constantine basically created Christmas using like the worship of the sun god day, the return of the sun god. I guess the winter solstice was the original day, but it's supposedly a day to worship Christ. And from what I could see on Facebook, nobody even mentions Jesus. And I posted a quote from the Bible, and everybody ignored it. It's like, it just goes to show that Satan is the god of this earth. And it seems like people who believe in the Bible and try to follow the word and accept Christ as their Savior and repent for their sins, you know, they're the minority, and they're the ones that get looked down on, ironically, these days. Anyway, about this Maitreya guy, William Cooper. Do you know who William Cooper was?
No, I don't know.
Well, he had a talk show, and he was killed outside of his home in Arizona. And it was a big controversy, and they think he was assassinated, basically. He was killed by the sheriff's department under very odd circumstances. He was basically just checking up on some people that were spying on him. And I think they said he had a gun, but he never fired any shots, and they put a couple bullets in him, ending his life. But he used to do shows on Christianity, and he did one on the Lord Maitreya coming. And what he said was, this is a quote from one of his audios, he said, the New Age religion is going to have a worldwide leader, a charismatic political and religious leader they call Lord Maitreya. At least so far, that's who they call him, or that's what they call him. This individual, as far as I know, has not made his public appearance yet, but the New Agers claim that he is on the earth, at least at the present time. They claim that he came to live with the Asian community in East London in July 1977 by descending from his ancient retreat in the Himalaya Mountains along the border of India and Tibet. They further believe that his imminent reemergence is into full public view, and that is assured. They also claim that this individual is the one that the Christians call Christ, the Jews call the Messiah, the Buddhists call the fifth Buddha, the Hindus call Krishna, and the Muslims call the Imam Mahdi. In other words, all of the major religions of the world are awaiting the arrival of this one individual, and it is their claim that this one individual now living in London is the one expected by all of these religions. Now, if that doesn't sound like the Antichrist that forces everybody to worship him, I can't think of anything else that sounds more like the Antichrist, because he's attempting to impersonate every single Messiah that is expected to come down. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, that, it would be standard. And again, biblically, what happened when the Messiah was prophesied to be born in Bethlehem? Herod wanted to kill all the firstborn sons. When Pharaoh heard of a deliverer being born in Egypt, Moses, what happened? He wanted to kill all the firstborn sons. And what's interesting is every one that you mentioned is a younger doctrine than the Bible. It's the oldest doctrine and the most documented doctrine that we know of, and there's not one of them, and it's the point I made earlier, that doesn't take all their points from that, yet they deny it. I mean, it's like, you invented a microwave oven, and I rip off your design, and I'm out selling it, telling everybody you're a fake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's ironic. Yeah, I just listened to a talk the other day about some guy who was basically giving a book review on Helena Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, and he was saying that the Christian religion copied the story about Krishna, and that when Krishna was born, some guy wanted to prevent that from happening and killed all the firstborn children in that era. And he kept saying, no, this was 1,000 years before Christ. And then he said, this is 2,000 years before Christ. And then he said, this is 7,000 years before Christ. And he just kept on throwing numbers out there. It was like, holy cow. I mean, if you're going to lie, at least make it, systematic and consistent. He kept on just making up
story down so you can remember your lie, huh?
Yeah, I know, huh? Yeah, and that's the way the Zeitgeist movement was. I mean, the Zeitgeist movie, when they were spewing out all those lies, at least they kind of had a little more consistency about their lying. But, it seems like if you're going to tell blatant lies like that, you should have to have a footnote somewhere or a header that says, you know, the following is full of false information, so read at your own risk. And, you know, don't necessarily believe everything you read.
Yeah, but see, that's always, they get into that incarnation stuff, and it, you know, it just isn't so. One point I was looking at, that there's several people listed that are followers of Helena and of the principles she taught, but I noticed they all have socialist literature or socialist background, socialist type teaching, and you know, if you're talking about the Antichrist, there's that socialism as a government outside of people. In other words, a law outside of us forcing us into a behavior, as opposed to Christianity, which is this the Spirit bringing, you know, helping us, you know, move into a better behavior without laws. And there's always a man at the head, and that you know, the socialist idea promoting, again, is opening the door for an Antichrist. Oh, we got to have this one guy at the head of it. You know, they're just blinded and don't realize what kind of a cog they are in that wheel of bringing that all about.
Yeah, have you heard of, excuse me, Raj Patel?
No.
Well, Raj Patel, he's this nice Indian guy that wrote a book about hunger and the problem with the world today with regard to the food supply. He wrote a book in 2008 called Stuffed and Starved, The Hidden Battle for the World Food System. His most recent book is The Value of Nothing, which was on the New York Times bestseller list during February 2010. Anyway, he's been referred to as the rock and roll star of social justice. And Benjamin Cream, the guy who's constantly telling everybody that the Maitreya is here and the Maitreya is there, well, he concluded that Raj Patel could be the Maitreya. And there's some really interesting videos on YouTube, and one of them in particular, this guy calls in, and he tries to ask Raj Patel if he is the Maitreya.
Well, so the original Green Revolution was really driven by large governments and large foundations. Now, Africa is the country where...
Excuse me, we do have a call.
Let's hear it.
Yes. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello?
Do you have a question? Hello, you're on the air.
Hello?
Do you have a question?
Twice in 2 times, yeah.
Could you speak just a little more clearly, sir?
Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, we're just not able to hear you well enough. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, proceed.
So the original Green Revolution was driven by these...
Excuse me, we do have a call.
Let's hear it.
Yes. Hello, you're on the air. Well, I'm sorry, we're just not able to hear you well enough. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, proceed.
And something weird happens with his voice, and it slows down and gets really creepy. And they're like, oh, can you speak a little more clearly because we can't make it out. And then he says in plain English, real easily, he said, is this better? And they're like, yeah, that's better. And then he tries again, and the same thing happens, and his voice slows down. And then they showed a video image of Raj's face while they rewound it and showed what Raj was doing with his face and his eyes while this guy was having a hard time talking. And it did kind of look like he was kind of like casting a spell or something weird. And that's what they were saying in this video, that, this Raj Patel guy, he's a Maitreya, and he's basically, possessed by a demon, and he's casting spells on people that try to out him. Anyway, that's kind of a bizarre concept. But you never heard about Raj Patel, huh?
No, I haven't heard of that one. I mean, there again, like I said earlier, we're going to enter in a time where, here's a Messiah and there's a Messiah, and so there's probably a bunch of them coming and around.
Yeah. I don't want to bag on the guy because he's got a really good point. His book Stuffed and Starved, he was quoted saying that there's something like 2 billion obese people on this earth, and 4 billion starving. And well, that makes no sense. You got all these gluttonous pigs eating all the food, and the starving people can't even get enough to live on. But they do say that about the Antichrist, that everybody's going to love him and want to follow him. So who knows? Could be. But you know what? We've got to come to our little intermission. We're done with the live portion of our show. I'm going to play David Habib Bardowell's God is Everything song, and then we will be back to talk about the Antichrist Maitreya in about 3 minutes.
God is love, God is life, God is everything. Strength and joy, hope and peace found in Him. God, you are love, you are life, you are everything. Please make your precious home in me. God is love, God is life, God is everything. Strength and joy, hope and peace found in Him. God, you are love, you are life, you are everything. Please make your precious home in me. When I am weak, you are strong, you're the tree life comes from. You're the owner of my soul, now my heart's an open door. Forever be the Lord of my life. God is love, God is life, God is everything. Strength and joy, hope and peace found in Him. God, you are love, you are life, you are everything. Please make your precious home in me. When I am weak, you are strong, you're the tree life comes from. You're the owner of my soul, now my heart's an open door. Forever be the Lord of my life. God is love, God is love, God is life, God is everything. Oh yeah. Strength and joy, hope and peace found in Him. Found in Him. God, you are love, you are life, you are everything. You are everything. Please make your precious home in me. Oh yes, Lord. Please make your precious home in me. 'Cause you are everything. Please make make your precious home in me. Oh, yeah.
Welcome back to Vision for Humanity Radio. This is Samuel D. Moore and Tim Williams. And today we're talking about the Lord Maitreya and the Antichrist, as well as Helena Blavatsky. And before we hung up, we were talking about, what were we talking about, Tim? Do you remember?
I was kind of focused on the point of how all of their teachings have an element of socialism. You know, all of these people are talking about inner peace and becoming God inside, and there's no principle that any one of these doctrines put forth that is not already found in the Bible. And I think you were talking about Hinduism, and they were saying that was thousands of years older than Christianity or the Jewish people. But nobody can prove that. I mean, the only evidence that they go by there is like carbon dating and some history books. But the Hindu history started at the same time that the Jewish history did, as far as anybody knows. Carbon dating, again, I was talking about Dr. Carl Baugh, another scientist associate of his, has proved the fallacy of carbon dating. It's just inaccurate. It does not go back millions of years with the rocks and stuff. But they put forth all these principles. I was reading some documents of the one Maitreya, the guy that was born in 1947 and died, in 2009, I think. If he was the Maitreya, he died. So apparently he didn't make it. So I don't know who the new one is. You were mentioning that other fella. I didn't quite remember his name, but Raj.
Oh yeah, let's see, Raj Patel.
Yeah, but okay. He was talking about the injustice. I think, if I heard you right, of the greedy people having all the food and the poor people starving. Well, that's been since the beginning of time. Again, Jesus, wasn't he the one that fed 5,000 people at a time? God, didn't he feed the tribe of Israel in the desert? The principle of God, taking care of the poor, taking care of his people, being kind, doing good works, it's all in the Bible. And like I said, every one of them wants to steal these ideas and put them forth, as they did it, the self-help books on the shelves in a bookstore. Oh, I have this wonderful new principle. It's a principle you can find in the Bible. They steal it and deny the Lord, deny God, deny the Bible, deny Jesus, and use it for their own gain. It's sad.
Yeah, it's sad. Hey, remember we were talking about Benjamin Creme? He's the guy who he basically channels the spirit of Maitreya. Well, in 1982, he put up a billboard of a message that he got from the Maitreya, and it basically outlines what the plan is. Remember that thing I just read to you about what Alice Bailey said when she channeled the spirit Jwal Kul, and she said that he told her death is not a disaster to be feared. The work of the destroyer is not cruel or undesirable. Therefore, there is much destruction permitted by the custodians of the plan, and much evil turned into good. Well, Benjamin Creme, he channeled the spirit Maitreya, and Maitreya told him what the plan was. And he said that the plan includes the installation of a new world government and a new world religion under Maitreya. Now that right there, that sums up the whole reign of the Antichrist in one sentence. So this Maitreya sounds to me like that's definitely going to be it. And I think that, the Christians are at a distinct advantage, because if you read the Bible, as per 2 Thessalonians 2, that let you not be deceived, for the day of Christ is not at hand until the son of perdition has been revealed. So we have an advantage in knowing that the first Messiah we see that comes down preaching that we need to all be under a new world government and a new world religion, and we need to take this microchip under our skin so we can buy and sell. We know for sure that that is the Antichrist, and we need to avoid that for sure. But you know how it says that there will be a great falling away? Well, I think that could very well happen is that all these people like the Zeitgeist movement who are trying to convince everybody that the Christ myth theory, that Jesus Christ was just another fairy tale, it didn't really happen, and that the Bible is just a bunch of jibber-jabber. And there was even a quote by one of these New Agers that said that the Bible and all that should be burned with the fire, and you should roast marshmallows on them or something really blasphemous like that. Anyway, I think a lot of people are going to buy into this Christ myth theory, with people claiming that Christ was just a myth, and they're not going to believe the Bible. And so when the Antichrist does come preaching peace and peace and safety, and one world religion, one world government, and taking a chip so you can buy or sell, they will have basically put the Bible on the back burner and said, that's just garbage. So this guy's good. I think that's what's going to happen. The great deception.
Yeah, it is. I'm also looking how much of this, like Patel, it revolves around food, buying and selling. We talked last week, a couple of weeks ago, about the Left Behind movies, and I know that's one of the principles they talked about. And Jesus talked about it. It'll take a day's wages to buy a loaf of bread. Control people with food, and we've talked about the Alimentarius Codex and the different organizations there to control nutrition, not just food, but nutrition. How better to control people other than, hey, go with me or starve. And I think that's one of the things that will bring the Antichrist in is ability, world hunger. How many organizations are called World Hunger or Feed the Children? And it's certainly a concern for Christians and non-Christians, but, it's a rallying point. If somebody can come in and become a big star of, alleviating hunger, he's going to be right at the top of the heap.
Yeah. This research on this Maitreya thing has kind of brought me some enlightenment, because up until now, the only group of people that I could see that rationalized killing other people were the jihad Muslims, the extremist Muslims, who basically said that, disbelief in Allah is worse than death, and that's how they rationalize killing you. But now with the New Agers, saying that you're basically holding everybody back, and that, death isn't necessarily a bad thing if it furthers the goal of the Maitreya and his plan. And in the New Testament, John even said, there come a time that whoever so killeth you will think that he does God's service.
Right.
So these people, and that's exactly what they're saying. You're holding us back from our evolution, and so we're doing God's will by killing you. This whole evolution principle where you're just inferior in spirit and mind and body, and so we've got to, do away with all these inferior organisms so that we can go on to our higher evolution. Whereas in the Bible, Jesus says to help the needy. If somebody hungers, give them food. If you thirst, give them water. You don't just say, you're obviously not of the right genetic material, or you would have your own food and water and kick them to the curb.
Right. Cut their head off.
Cut their head off.
Yeah. I'm looking at something here just as I look at the Benjamin Cream and the Maitreya, how many sites are tying Obama to the Maitreya and the Antichrist.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to it, but there's a bunch. So I know a lot of people are looking at it. That was a guy that we always marvel at that, got a Nobel Peace Prize and had done nothing. Got a Nobel Peace Prize on something he might do. And when I remember they did interviews, well, what do you think he's going to do? Oh, he's going to bring peace to the whole world.
Isn't that ironic?
Yeah.
Hey, you want to hear something really creepy? Have you ever heard of Lucis Trust?
No.
Well, Lucis Trust was a organization, like a non-profit organization, that they offer a school to teach people New Age philosophies like Theosophy and the Luciferian doctrine. It's basically a Luciferian religion, as the name implies, Lucis Trust. Well, anyway, I went to their Facebook page, and they have a statement on there that says that the United Nations uses their literature or endorses their literature or something to that effect. And, from what I've heard about the United Nations, those guys are on the fast track to the whole New World Order thing.
Right. I just did a search, and it came up with Lucis Trust, Obama, Lucis Trust, Oprah, Lucis Trust members, Bill Gates, Rockefeller, United Nations. I mean, the names tied to that are interesting. I mean,
Yep. Lucis Trust and the United Nations. That shows you Lucifer and the United Nations seem to be in cahoots. Well, anyway, that's it for this show. Thanks for tuning in, and tune in next week, Friday nights at 8:30 with Vision for Humanity Radio, and have a nice evening.
Truly are as one, and there's no mountain too high, no road too rough, no desert too dry, no trial too tough. Your word, when it fills me, tells the mountains, move. Your peace, when it steals my heart, makes all my roads smooth. And the deserts are watered by fountains of love. All my needs are met in Christ, there's always enough. So I go 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, you know. Each step is right when you walk the King's Road, and go following the promise of the promised one. Never in the darkness when you're walking in the sun. My